Welcome back to my channel, Conspiracy and Crime. Today, I'm going to bring you a story straight out of Canada. No, it doesn't have a conspiracy tied to it. Yes, it has a little bit of crime tied to it, but the subject itself is not a crime. I am going to talk about my home country, which I do not live at anymore. I am a U.S. citizen. But I just heard today that Mr. Trudeau froze all handgun sales, trades, and bringing across the border from now until forever. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is, yes, there's crime attached to it. I think, though, that this is a huge verdict in the country of Canada. And I wanted to give a little bit of background, especially to my U.S. peers, about how things kind of work in Canada from a citizen's perspective. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a government agent. I can't speak from that side. I can only speak from the 20 years that I lived in Canada and my experience around guns. So, first and foremost, I will tell you that yes, we did own a lot of guns when I was a kid. Most of them were long rifles, anything from a 22 to a 303 to a 30-06, 6mm, 7mm, so on and so forth. And we did have one handgun as well. So not multiple, but just one. Typically what we would do is we would use them when we would go hunting. That would happen typically one time a year. It would start generally November 1st. Since it was gun season, it would go until November 20th. And then if you were a bow hunter, which we were not, it would be extended, I think, a week after that, but you would have to correct me if I was wrong. And typically we were hunting for deer. So if we were hunting for different animals, the dates would be a little bit different. But that was kind of my background with guns. Now, throughout the year, we would go up to a place called Bear Mountain, just outside of Dawson Creek, British Columbia, and we would do our target practice. Typically, it would be with oil barrels. They were empty, of course, and we'd put targets on them and then just keep our skills honed. But we learned everything we needed to know about gun safety, how to carry a gun, how to make sure that a gun wasn't loaded. But we also learned that we treated every gun as if it was loaded. Even if we unloaded it ourselves, we still never pointed a gun at anybody for any reason. And when we transported firearms, we always made sure that they were either in cases or that they were stored properly, and we have never have the ammo in the front with us. So there was just basic things that we learned as kids that really helped with gun safety. Same thing with the handgun. We learned how to clean it. We learned how to load it, unload it. We learned how to treat it. Again, same principles, never pointed at anybody. We always made sure that it was stored properly. It would be stored in a case. We did have a holster for it, but I don't ever remember anybody ever wearing it as a holster. Typically, even when we went hunting, it stayed in the case. And we'd pull it out when we would do target practice, things like that. And when we would get home, we had a gun cabinet that was under lock and key, that people just didn't have access to. So it felt like it was pretty safe, and you just didn't hear a lot about firearms. Okay. Keep in mind, I did grow up in a pretty small town. So as you're envisioning this, again, it was Dawson Creek, British Columbia. I think it was a town of 12,000. I think in the entire 20 years I was there, minus a few years that I lived outside of the town growing up, I think we had one total murder in that time, maybe two. And one did involve a firearm, and then the other one did not. And then most of the time, any crimes that would happen, you typically wouldn't hear that they would happen with firearms. Now, keep in mind, I know it's been a few years since I was there and things have gotten a little bit worse. I can't speak to what Canada looks like now, but I can say that it is a different environment than the U.S. when it comes to guns. By no means am I a gun advocate, but on the same token, I am also not an advocate for people not to have guns. So I kind of sit in the middle on this one. I don't go one way, I don't go another. I think people need to be responsible if they do have them. And I also believe that when you do possess one, that there is opportunities and situations that could arise that they could be used with caution, we'll say. right? Sometimes they get used a little quicker than what they need to be, but there's other situations where people don't have firearms that a firearm may have protected them. So I acknowledge all of that stuff. I don't get in the way of any of that kind of stuff, right? So now, watching Canada freeze all handgun sales, I have a few questions that I ask. Number one, what happens to the people that have handguns now? So I know that nothing's going to happen to them if they already own it. They're not coming after their guns yet. But is that something that comes in the future, right? Is that something that there's stricter laws, or people that have already owned them and possess them? Are they going to come take those guns away? And then on the flip side, the new generation coming up, or the people that have been responsible now are not allowed to buy a gun. What does that look like? And how much backlash are they going to get for that? I would also like to see, what really prompted that. Are we seeing a pretty big increase in handgun crimes? Because my experience, again, a lot of crimes were done with long guns, and shotguns seem to be pretty popular as well. And again, I'm not condoning it. We use guns for hunting. That was basically it. So I can go either way on this one. I am just asking the questions because of just pure curiosity, and what does that look like for my fellow Canadians? The other thing that I think of is, living in the U.S. is the Second Amendment, and that is an amendment that is protected. And I will tell you that, coming over here, I think that you have to protect stuff like that. Now, I do also believe that things could change, absolutely, but I think that the fundamentals should stay the same always. And when I made the decision to come to the U.S., I read through the Constitution. I had to take a test on it. And when I came over and I pledged allegiance and I went through, I did all the testing I needed to do. I came here because I wanted to be here, not because I came to change what the country is today. Now, if you know me personally, I don't get into politics. I am not left. I am not right. You could, I guess, call me middle, but I don't really talk about it too much. I don't typically talk about race or religion either. I'm really that independent, believe what I believe, and so on and so forth. And I do like to be challenged in my thoughts, and I do like it when people can stop and have a good conversation. And sometimes they'll change my views, right? I really believe that cooler minds can typically come to a resolution or a conclusion a lot better than two people that are really stuck in their beliefs and their ways. So that's just kind of who I am. On the flip side, if somebody is stuck in their ways, I've got a lot of friends that are stuck in their ways one way or another, specifically on this topic of guns. And I listen to both sides. I think that that's what you should do as a person, and that's what I'm doing now. So I will encourage you to comment down below. What do you think of the situation that's happening in Canada? One, do you think it's right? And then explain why. One, do you think it's wrong? And explain why. I would ask that we keep the comments clean and everybody is allowed to have their opinion, but we can always come back and revisit this to see what happens in the future and to talk about what people think of this. So I'm going to leave you with this, okay? I'm very interested to see what this looks like in the future from a handgun's perspective. Now, it could be a good case study where we see that crime goes down, murders go down, utilization of a weapon goes down. I think that some of the challenges that we're going to see and that the government's going to have and the police agencies are going to have is that there's a lot of black market guns, specifically in North America, and that's from Mexico to the US to Canada. And what does it really do to those guns, right? So I'm curious to see what the strategy is around that. So is it really going to eliminate or even in the future generation, bring down some of the crimes that we see with firearms? That's a big one for me. Number two, I'm curious to hear how that impacts your upstanding citizens, right? The 80 to 90% citizens that aren't committing crimes or that are utilizing firearms in the proper manner. What does that look like for them, right? Are they being punished for firearms being taken away, or do they just not care? And that's a real possibility as well. And I would like to see, over time, because it's not going to happen overnight, what does that look like for those folks as well? And my hope is that it ends up being a good case study, but my hope is also that everybody that touches a firearm gets trained like I did, and that treats them very well. So that's kind of my take on it. Again, I don't lean one way or the other in either Canada or the US. I really like to try to stay neutral. And when I do make a decision, I never share that decision out. But I am open to hearing both sides all the time. And I think it's a good debate. However, where people get confused is when they make a stance, I ask tough questions. I make sure that those questions are tough. Whether I agree with them or not, I want to know if that person can articulate what they really believe, or do they just believe what they heard? Because that is the most dangerous thing that could happen, is just believing what you hear without doing the research. So I'm leaving you with that. Again, my conspirators, I appreciate you clicking on this video. I would like to hear what your thoughts are on it. Again, very open discussion. And until next time, I hope you have a great night.